Welcome back to another episode of Contra Mundum. I am Andrew Isker, and with me is CJ Engel. And how are you today, CJ? What is new? What's happening?
Nothing's happening. Nothing's new. It's more relaxed for this month because I am done with my summer push at work, and so I've been spending more time on Twitter talking about very important issues like the crisis in silicone wedding rings.
Yes, very important.
Yes, this is the controversy of the moment, and I'm here for it. So.
Yeah, you can all check that out. CJ is waging a one-man war on the how would you put it? I mean, obviously, like, you're kind of trolling. You're trying to get Jimmy's rustled with this, but I think you're making a point about how, I mean, it's
well,
just the general lessening of standards of culturally and
it's really
and things
it's
like
really
that.
it's really just like analogous to when Tucker Carlson was railing on drywall.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm never gonna live in a house with drywall.
Yeah, it's like the same thing. And then like just classic like evangelical Twitter just poured in talking about how I was making up sins, and stuff like out of nowhere. And so then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go with this one. This is gonna be way more fun. So we went with the anyone wearing a silicone Apple Watch is living in sin. They need to repent. So it got fun.
Oh, I don't know what you're. Whoa. But no, it's hilarious. People have a hard time with any kind of cultural criticism when it's like stuff that they do, like especially if you attack, liking NFL football, or you make fun of the normie that loves football and wants to grill. It's like, it's a personal attack on me, and you're saying I'm sinning, and it's like, no, it's not. It's not a sin. It's saying it's criticism of broader culture.
I don't think evangelicals have a category for that type of argument. They can't really think in like meta terms.
Yeah,
they can only think of individual terms.
Yeah, so my individually sinning.
Yeah, there's a historical reason for that, for sure. But anyways, an interesting observation turned into just a great money-making opportunity. Elon Musk is paying me big bucks to dunk on the silicone industry. So
no, it's great. I had a post that also took off this week where I gave kind of a basic understanding of New Testament theology as it pertains to Jews today. That, in my view, is largely that rooted in Galatians chapter 3 and Galatians chapter 4, that the promises to Israel, all these promises of the old covenant, are in Christ. They belong to Christians. They belong to those who are of the faith of Abraham and not of Abraham's blood. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people didn't like to hear that, because there's a lot of really, and largely because of dispensational theology, right? This really bizarre misunderstanding of what Jews and Judaism is today. And so that one went crazy. That one got me quoted in the Jerusalem Post. So, pray that some, Israelis see that and they look into the Bible a little bit, into the New Testament, and ask some questions. But we've had a lot of fun online in the last week, but we only made it last week halfway through that Anton article. And so I wanted to get back to that, because we didn't really get to the meat of it. We got to what is unprecedented about our situation in America, right? All of the things that are not analogous to Rome, and to the collapse and fall of the Roman Empire. But we didn't get it to the part where he says, okay, what does it mean for us now? Where do we go from here? What does the future look like for us? And I think that's like the best part of the article.
Hmm.
If you want to get rolling on that, if you want to read, continue reading, doing our book report on Michael Anton's article,
Let's
go
do
go
it.
right ahead.
Let's do it. All right. So now we're down in Tyranny, Old and New. And here we go. Tyrants or ruling classes that despoil their countries for personal gain are nothing new. If that were all we had today, our situation would be much more understandable. And we do in part have that. Our ruling class is rich and rapacious, rich because rapacious, and eager to be richer still by taking what little you have left. Yet elite enthusiasms extend well beyond mere greed. There is a malice in them atypical to the native despot, one found historically only or largely among the most punitive conquerors. A tyrant fears a healthy population, to be sure, because such is always a threat to his power. This fear typically inspires little beyond efforts to ensure that the population is dependent and unarmed, two aims of our overlords, it need hardly be added. But our elites also go much further. They seem determined to make the American population fat, weak, ugly, lethargic, drug addled, screen addicted, and hypersexualized. The men effeminate, the women masculine. Those last two actually barely scratch the surface of the agenda, which includes turning males into females and vice versa, or into any one of a potentially infinite number of genders. The number varies depending on which source you check. 63 is the highest I could find. Needless to say, no establishment source stops at 2. The regime promotes every imaginable historic form of degeneracy and then invents new ones undreamt of by Caligula, the is it the Borgias, or Catherine the
Borgias.
Great? Yeah,
Yeah.
or Catherine the Great. All these it pushes through every available media channel, social and legacy, in programming and advertising alike, even in books stocked in elementary school libraries. As I write, the Virginia governor's race is being roiled by the presence in said libraries of Genderqueer, a memoir, an illustrated children's book as sexually explicit as 1970s hardcore pornography, and arguably illegal to boot since it depicts minors. One candidate for governor and his supporters indignantly insist that this kind of material must be forced on your kids at public expense and that only Nazis object. Degeneracy in tyrants is, of course, as old as the hills, but prior despots had the decency, if one could call it that, to restrict their perversions to the satisfaction of their own private pleasures. To force degeneracy on the whole of society with the explicit intent of bringing the rest of us to our knees, literally and figuratively, that I think has never happened before. Uh, the culture war is an interesting aspect because I think a lot of people just have this instinct that it's just this organic result of people living in sin. You know,
Mhm.
we've sort of lost our way, and so the culture is spinning out of control. I think Anton recognizes here something that I've come to believe, which is that this is intentional and it's meant to demoralize
Yeah.
and divide. And you can't have a sustainable culture or a civilization if the culture itself is I don't want to say rotting because rotting sounds organic and natural. It's
Yeah.
being set aflame.
Yeah.
It's being it's being completely disseminated and
Yeah. It's
liquidated.
being mutilated, right? It's like they're tearing it apart purposely. Yeah. I mean, this is, it's funny. Like he writes that second paragraph or third paragraph in this section is, you know where it says they just seem determined to make the American population fat, weak, ugly, lethargic, drug addicted, screen addicted, and so forth. Right. I mean, well, yeah, that's basically what I write about in my book, right? It's all that same stuff is purposeful. It's intentional. And the culture war things, the pushing of pornography in elementary school libraries and sexualizing little children and pushing transgenderism on them, that's not, you're right, it's not organic. It's not like, oh, this is just the inexorable process of a society that decays into sin,
Hmm.
because you don't have that. These are unprecedented things in the same way. You don't have these even non-Christian or apostate places, right, that reject Christianity, reject the truth of in God's word and so forth. They don't devolve into that kind of stuff. There's certainly a sin, and it rises, and there's societal decay and crime and all of these different problems. Um, but it doesn't reach this level unless someone is driving it, unless someone wants to produce these results. Because the if we think about it, like just like the natural man, right, even in his sin, still wants peace and order and stability, right? You have like ancient paganism, they had societies that were able to function,
Hmm.
right? They had societies where there was something, very close to marriage that we have today, that existed, right? Because it promoted this societal stability. You wanted families, you wanted children to be raised by their mother and father. And because even like he says, even tyrants, right? Even people with a tremendous amount of political power that wield it with an iron fist, even those people still want a society that functions, because without that, they don't have power, right? Like if you are, he brings up Caligula or the Borgias. If you are those people, you want the society to exist. I mean, I think he brings up the Borgias because that's, he's almost referring to Machiavelli, right? That's who Machiavelli is writing his book about, is Cesare Borgia. Um, and he's explaining like this is how they operate. This is how a tyrant comes in. Like, you read Machiavelli and he talks about like conquering a foreign people, and you have to be extremely brutal with them in order to pacify them. And that's what our leaders are doing to our own people, um, to their own society, right?
Hmm.
Because, and I think largely because they view it as an alien one. They view it as one that is not theirs. They view it as one that needs to be destroyed and overturned.
Hmm.
And so that's not normal. Like, that's not common. That is, I mean, the closest thing you can, as far as an historical analogy you can make, is like the Bolshevik Revolution.
Yeah, and 1920s Germany.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
It's like there's nothing else like even remotely close to it. And even like people want to um make the comparison to Weimar and to 1920s Germany. And I don't even think that fits, because the crazy stuff, like, yeah, okay, yeah, the first transgender clinic was in Berlin, and like the books that were being burned were actually like trans books and porn and things like that. Um, but that was largely very isolated, right? It was just Berlin. It was just in the seediest parts of Berlin. It wasn't
Yeah,
not the
so
entire country of
I,
Germany.
I think I think the strategies are really similar, intentional and politically driven, but we have better mechanisms of dissemination. So like
Yeah,
because we have the internet, because we have advanced digital technology, that's why it's more widespread. And I think Anton makes this point actually.
yeah,
He talks about the function of technology. So we can
yeah.
keep going.
Let's do that.
Yep. But it's also true that our rulers advocate and celebrate careerism, consumerism, self centeredness, casual sex, delayed marriage, let us say, non fecund couplings, and where and if all that
Wait,
fails,
you
small
skipped the
families.
paragraph before that. That's important.
Did
That's
I?
an important one. Yeah, an odd feature.
Ah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Uh,
Scratch that. Okay. This paragraph, though, is only for our premium listeners.
yes,
Yes.
that's right.
Okay. An odd feature of our time is the coupling of mass hypersexualization with mass barrenness. Some argue, plausibly, that the link is direct. Hypersexualization disconnected from procreation inevitably leads to fewer babies. The degree to which crashing fertility is simply an effect of modernity versus a deliberate plan by our rulers is an open question. It's a good question, and people need to be asking that
Yeah, it's a
question.
very good question.
It is certainly true that every economically and technologically developed society, regardless of region, culture, race, or religion, suffers from cratering birth rates.
Yeah, let's pause there, because I think we should talk about this for a second.
I mean, this leads into the immigration debate. Like, it's so
Both. Yeah,
to me, the way I interpret this is if there is a political drive to limit the amount of natural children that people can be having, they have like an open pathway to immigration as sort of a necessary stabilizer.
Yeah.
They can drive the immigration debate just by the very fact of limiting natural birth development.
Oh, we're not having kids, so we need to import, 10 million third world people to
Mhm.
replace them. And that's the argument. That's the argument they make. And
My advice my advice to fight back against this would, of course, be to avoid silicone. So
that's 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 right. Well,
it's all connected,
it's
okay?
all it's all there. Um the Yeah, the some of it, as far as the open question is, yeah, you see this, and Anton is right. You look across um the entire world, and every developed country
Mhm,
suffers from this. So you have the same low level of birth rates in Iran, right? Which is this very austere um, Muslim country, that restricts women's rights and all of this kind of stuff, and yet their birth rate is I can't remember off the top of my head where it's at. It might be lower than America's, than the United States. It may not lower than most of Western Europe, but you see this, and you understand, like, well, okay, well, what does industrialization bring? It brings this level of material prosperity, but it also brings access to economic productivity to women. And so women leave their traditional role in the household as being a mother, and they go to the workplace and work, and so they, as a result, have fewer children. Right. This is something I brought up on Twitter, on the X, and of course, people freak out about that. It's like, no, I could work and to send my kids to daycare and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, you have like two, maybe three kids tops, when your great grandparents had eight or more, and the population grew. Now it's shrinking because and that's all if you get married and have kids. Like, that's only half of people
mhm.
that get married and have kids. The other half just never get married, or get married and never have kids. Um and that there are economic and societal reasons, systematic ones, that drive this. I mean, you look today, at the average price of a home throughout the United States, and it's unaffordable for, like, if I were 25 years old and recently married and starting a family, how would I afford to live, right? How would I afford to live in a home? Like, we were fortunate enough to buy our home here in 2018, when the interest rate was like 2%,
Mhm,
and housing prices were like half of what they are today. Um, if you were trying to do that today, you can't. You can't
mhm.
without, certainly on a single income, much less two. It's not possible. And so people don't think about this. And this is stuff like, when is the last time you heard, like, evangelical Christian leaders or commentators talk about these issues? Like,
Yeah.
ever? Never. They don't talk about it at all.
Mhm,
Right, they'll if they do talk about, like, birth rates and things like that, it's like, well, men need to man up. They just need to man up and go marry that gal, marry the single mom in the church, and then and go have a family. And it's like, you don't get it. You don't get the conditions that people are in, and how extremely difficult it is for people to live, and to have families. And so, I mean, it brings us back. I mean, we talked about this months and months ago on one of our first episodes, I think, that debate between Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro,
mhm,
right? You remember that one? And Tucker's like, I don't. If your economic system doesn't make it easier for my kids to get married and have families, then your economic system's garbage. I don't care if you what you believe about the free market, because whatever it's not working. It's not. Whatever it is. And of course, to all the libertarian purists, it's not a free market that Ben Shapiro is defending. It's complete garbage, and so much of it is because of monetary policy, right?
mhm.
They've destroyed the currency. I mean, right now, why does stuff cost so much? Well, what this week, didn't they spend $275 billion in a single day?
Mhm.
In one day. And that's just like normal spending. It isn't like
Yeah.
some extraordinary measure that they did. It was just, that's what they spent. And you remember back to, like, the days of Obama, when they passed like the stimulus package, and that was like $800 billion, and there was a huge freak out about it, as there should have been. And that's like almost half the way there in a single day, just normal spending.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. And then you talk about like Ukraine getting, um, hundreds of billions of dollars of aid, and all the spending on top of it. Like I I think, as we think in the meta picture here, like this cannot continue on forever,
Hmm.
right? It simply cannot. So something is going to pop, and it's going to be bad.
Hmm.
And but it has to, in order for things to normalize.
Yeah.
But as it pertains to like birth rates and things like that, it's interesting. Like the only country that has like fairly positive birth rates, I think they're at like 2.8, is
Hmm.
Israel, right? Which is weird. That's that's the only, and so it kind of, they're kind of the outlier here. But I think because why is it? Well, because they have a national identity,
Right.
right?
Right.
They're like, our nation needs to keep existing as a nation, and we need to have kids to do that. Even though they're an industrialized country, and so I think I think some of it too is, it isn't just simply the process of history and what happens when you industrialize. It's that, this type of worldview, or this type of mindset or thinking that comes in with industrialization, um, causes a people to become deracinated and view their nation as an economic zone, and they have no sense of purpose whatsoever. Right? When Americans were having children, they thought of themselves as a people and said, we need to continue our people. Like, you read the beginning of the United States Constitution, right, to secure these for our posterity. And like that, they thought about that kind of stuff. And we just think, oh, kids are a nice lifestyle choice, a nice lifestyle accessory.
Hmm.
Right? Oh, if you want to have kids, that's cool. I don't want to have kids. I'm just going to play video games and collect Funko Pops. Right? That's my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Oh,
that's how they treat it,
this is a good topic because like Hillary Clinton used to say that, it takes a village to raise a child,
Yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
this is important because the response to the lefts, they want to capture the minds of all the kids. But
Yeah.
the typical conservative response is that just to leave it up to individual lifestyles, and there's no
Mhm.
judgment, there's no collective meaning of posterity,
Mhm.
there's no future outlook on things. I think that we had the wrong approach to the progressivization of youth minds.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
we needed to pursue a positive vision and capture their minds in our own way for our own objectives, for the sake of history in the future. So,
Yeah.
individualism is not the solution here at
No.
all.
No. No. Collectivism is just kidding.
Well, I mean, yeah, I do believe in the priority of collectivity
of
sometimes.
the people, right? Of your people as a whole.
Yeah, I'm
And
not,
but it takes individuals pursuing those goals together, right?
sure.
It's both and that's where people have such a hard time recognizing this. But now you can read the paragraph you tried to read before.
All right, let's do it. But it's also true that our rulers advocate and celebrate careerism, consumerism, self centeredness, casual sex, delayed marriage, let us say non fecund couplings, and where and if all that fails, small families for the environment, you understand. In
Mhm.
other words, when and where the allegedly inexorable process of modernity is overcome by the innate human desire for love and family, the regime eagerly steps in with propaganda to bully men and women out of such longings. I suppose there is a near historical precedent for this, namely China's one child policy in effect from 1980 to 2015. But that was implemented to relieve, it was thought, a looming Malthusian crisis, a fear that cannot reasonably apply to contemporary America, whose birth rate is 1.64 and falling like a stone. China itself, whose leaders want its people to live on, abandoned the policy. Meanwhile, America unofficially does everything it can to suppress native births. Has this ever happened before in a country not even plausibly facing a population crisis? The promotion of ugliness deserves special attention. The autocrats of old wanted to be known for their patronage of beauty, the arts, and great works. This is one meaning of Shelley's Ozymandias, and also of Augustus's boast that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble, to say nothing of having commissioned the Aeneid. A stroll through any city in Europe and in most of the Americas finds the same sentiment everywhere, until about the middle of the 20th century when suddenly everything turned brutalist, brutally ugly, and not just the buildings, but the art, the literature, the music, almost everything, including the wedding rings.
You're not going to let that one go. No.
I'm not, no. One attempts to state the following as delicately as possible. Even though regime propaganda on this score is anything but delicate, but today the ugliness extends to people. One hesitates. Man, this is so good. You're not allowed to say this in certain
Oh, yeah.
circles, but okay.
No, you're not.
But yeah, so it extends to person. One hesitates also to say anything that could be interpreted as praise of underwear ads, but within living memory, the sirens of Times Square billboards were lithe and lovely. Today, they are quite deliberately obese and angry. That is, when they're not cross-dressers or pierced like an East Village junkie and tattooed like a C-list porn star. All this, we are commanded to believe, is beautiful, though no healthy person does. The point seems to be humiliation. Exactly. Forcing us little people to say the thing which is not. The trick is also as old as the hills, but the deliberate promotion of ugliness seems to be a new way to play it. Antiquity abounded in wicked tyrants, yet try to find an ancient statue anywhere near as hideous as modern lingerie model. This is actually an important
Yep.
point because
Extremely important.
people really don't know how to think like this. Like, because our stock response is it's all about the heart.
That's right.
The exterior doesn't matter. They don't realize that out of the quality of the spirit flows objective, empirical, sights. You have,
Yep.
the body reflects the soul. The building reflects the soul of the people. These are all things that the ancients and the classic Christendom believe and taught for 1,000 years. Is you need beauty. Roger Scruton was great on this. We are a demoralized people because we are subsumed in ugliness.
Yeah, absolutely everywhere. And I mean, you see it. I mean, people talk about physiognomy online, and it's always kind of funny. But you see that, like, if you are unhealthy, if you are obese, if you've made yourself look ugly now, and that's where people, like, they get kind of up in arms if you remark on physiognomy, right? If you have, like, the fat neck beard and you screenshot his profile picture as a response to a dumb argument, people don't like that. You're being mean. But the point is, right? Everyone, the natural beauty that you have or don't have is that's something God gives or doesn't give. But if you intentionally make yourself to be ugly, if you make yourself look more hideous, it's funny because, like, most people, most men, for example, and women, like, are normal looking, good looking, if you're not 100 pounds overweight, right? And so if you make yourself really fat and you have all sorts of weird, facial hair, not like a beautiful mustache, but just this, neck beard, and you wear the flannel and the neck beard, and you got the IPA in your hand, and it's like that's like the uniform of the bug man.
Mm-hmm.
And um out of the heart the mouth speaks, but out of the heart also your body looks. Like, you can judge books by their cover.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a tell of what you love, right? You love to consume, you love this world if you look like you love it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the point. And you also see that not just with people's own, physical bodies and what they've allowed their bodies to become, but also you see it in the public art, which is all just, it's hideous, it's ugly. I mean, Roger Scruton has all sorts of stuff about this. I mean, this goes back through the 20th century. He talks about what Marcel Duchamp, the urinal, that he presented a urinal in an art gallery, and, oh, isn't it so transgressive? Oh yeah. And it's like, no, it's deliberately ugly, and it's supposed to evoke revulsion. And that's the point. To try to, like, that's the only thing that gets people attention in art today, is how do I make it more shocking and more ugly and more hideous and more revolting? Not how can I capture beauty in this transcendent sense that inspires awe, right? That's traditionally what art did.
Mm-hmm.
and good art did. Now it's anti-art.
Mm-hmm.
It's to promote the opposite of that. And you see that with architecture as well. And Tucker makes this point, I think drawing upon Scruton, where all the time he's like, you look at the buildings in our major cities, and what people used to build were buildings that you would are pleasant to drive by or walk by and see and be, because they're not just buildings that have a functionality in this utilitarian purpose. They're buildings that they uplift you. They make you feel better about the place that you're living and the landscape that you see around you. And
They
um,
shape, yeah, they shape our minds, you know,
yeah,
and
and the whole reality that you're in.
yeah.
And so if you have something that's intentionally ugly, and of course the Soviets did this. This is part of what, like, all of their just like concrete buildings that are just oppressive and make you feel like you're in prison. Well, that's what ours are too. It makes
Mhm.
you feel like you're locked in this prison of hideousness, and it messes with your mind. It makes you feel depressed and anxious and alone. And that's the point. That's the point of it. They want this. And it isn't, and it's funny, like, all of this stuff, it isn't like there is some secret cabal of like 4 or 5 people that are pulling all the strings and saying, we're going to make all the buildings ugly and we're going to make all the people fat. It's this like decentralized, conspiracy. It's like what Moldbug talks about, where everybody knows their place in it and the agenda and the ideology they have to pursue, right? It's unspoken. They don't need, nobody no one has to tell you when you go to art school or architecture school, okay, now we're going to make everything as ugly as possible, right?
Right,
It's
because
just baked in the cake.
yeah, because like sociological developments are manifestations of spiritual conflict. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I
absolutely.
mean, I think that he's right to talk about humiliation. I think
Mhm.
demoralization is another good word to add to what's happening here.
Absolutely.
But a demoralized and a humiliated people are not willing to fight for themselves or their future.
100%.
So,
100%. Let's
I'll
continue
keep
on
going.
here. The
Okay.
next one is very spicy.
But in terms, am I on the right paragraph? Yes. But in terms of what we choose to elevate, nothing illustrates the perversity of present America more than the deification of George Floyd. There are now monuments to him all over the country that are treated as sacred. In a rare instance, when one is defaced, the resultant outcry resembles the Athenian people's reaction to the desecration of the Hermae. One may insist that George Floyd did not deserve to die the way he did, and still see that neither did he live his life so as to make the possibility remote. He was convicted of 8 crimes and charged with or detained for at least 19, though one must here concede the difficulty of finding reliable, relevant information, since unflattering facts about George's or Floyd's life are effectively suppressed and are taboo to discuss. The worst of his crimes was an armed robbery in which he pointed a gun at the belly of a woman who may or may not have been pregnant. Floyd's admirers insist she wasn't, but more careful sources assert that no one has ever definitively proved she was. Floyd was the father of 5 children, from whose lives he was by all accounts absent, and none of whose mothers he ever married. At the time of his death, Floyd was in the process of being arrested for yet another crime and was not cooperating with the arresting officers. A serial drug abuser, he had in his system not just methamphetamine, but a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl, an extremely dangerous synthetic opioid, which may well have contributed to his death. Even if one fully accepts the trial court's findings that the drugs played no role, which, by the way, has since been corrected, he did die of overdose.
Yeah. Yeah.
One must still admit that had Floyd only gotten into the back of the police vehicle as officers instructed, he could not have died in the way prosecutors and the media alleged. Above all, we must confront the painful fact that Floyd did not, according to moral standards that for centuries were taken for granted, live a life worthy of admiration, much less veneration. Yet, our society treats him as a saint, if not something higher. The pagan gods were not always well behaved, to say the least. But has any people ever chosen such an undeserving object of worship?
Yeah, I mean a major point that nobody talks about it because you're not allowed to talk about it. It's that they've deified this man,
Yeah.
right? They're like, they name streets after him, they're naming schools after him, they put up these statues everywhere, and it's like, this guy doesn't deserve, by any rational standard of praise or admiration, of being praised, right? This total um th- it's this total worship of victimhood, right? As its own thing.
Well, it's the same. It's the worship not only of victimhood, but it's the worship of like decivilization, of ugliness,
Yeah.
of all the things that he's been talking about.
Yeah.
This is literally he for them is a model and an emblem of our affection because he represents all the trends that they've been facilitating for decades.
Yeah, and it's like I mean, you see this just this week with the pro crime podcaster in Brooklyn or Manhattan or wherever he was in New York City, who was some guy's like breaking into a car and he tries to go talk to him, and then
Hmm.
the guy stabs him to death while his girlfriend just like stands there,
Yeah,
and people are of course up in arms because people on the right are saying, well, you know, life comes at you fast, right?
right.
Or just like mocking his death. And ironically, the people freaking out about that are the same ones who were gleeful about the death of Rush Limbaugh and things like that. Wanted Kyle Rittenhouse to get the chair and things like that. Um, and so it's and you see, and then you find out like his friends get interviewed, and it's like, no, he would want that guy to stab him, right? He would understand why he did it because of all the racism he suffered and income inequality and all of these things. He probably had a good reason for stabbing like he would be on his side. And the guy's girlfriend won't give the description to the police or cooperate with the investigation whatsoever. Too, it's so bizarre because they worship this, they worship crime and decay and societal destruction, right?
Hmm.
That's what these people worship. They love it. And like there is no, with all of this, there's no fixing these people, right? There's no like, oh, we're gonna have an argument and persuade them of our point of view. No,
Right,
you aren't.
right.
No, the only thing you could do is exercise power and destroy everything that they're trying to do. And either they get with the program and submit to power, or they don't. Right. And like that's I think the reality that like people that worship George Floyd, right? You're not going to be able to have like rational discourse and civil, this civil society. We'll share a country with these people and we'll just, we'll have elections and vote. It's like, no, you're in a war between a people that want to totally destroy civilization and your society and everything you love, and um what is good and true and beautiful and normal. And somebody has to win. And right now, those people are winning. Right? That's how you have to understand the fact that there are George Floyd monuments everywhere tells you which side is winning.
Hmm.
This point, that I think is one of Anton's best points in this article. But let's continue on. There's way more. We're not even done yet.
Oh yeah. We may tie these points together under the broad rubric of education, though that word is risibly inapt to what is taught today. The word's root is Latin and means to lead forth, that is, to coax out of imperfect but improvable human nature that which makes each human being better. Or, as the classics understood it, not merely to impart knowledge, but also to form character. In both respects, our system does the opposite. It teaches lies, attacks and suppresses truth, and encourages people to behave worse. It tells children to hate themselves or their classmates because of their race and to hate their country. It encourages boys to declare themselves girls and vice versa. It badgers kids into professing themselves attracted to members of the same sex or of all 63 sexes, regardless of or despite their natural inclination. It fire hoses them with sexualized messaging and imagery, always taking care to decouple orgasmic self indulgence from love and family. The people who run the system, or many of them, can only be described as sadists. How sick does one's mind have to be to think it is a good idea to teach a black kindergartner, through the taxpayer financed public education system, no less, to hate his white classmates or those white classmates to hate themselves? A sane society would call this child abuse.
Yes, it would.
The system now protects predators at the expense of the vulnerable and attacks parents who object. In Virginia, a boy in a skirt entered a girl's bathroom and raped a student. The school and the district hushed it up and transferred him to another school where he did it again. When one victim's father complained at a school board meeting, cops roughed him up and arrested him. The superintendent, principal, and all others in authority furiously denied that any assault had ever taken place, that is, except for the father's impassioned plea, which the school board referred to the Attorney General of the United States, who then ordered the FBI and U.S. attorneys to investigate outspoken parents as domestic terrorists. This is not merely insane, but deliberately evil. The Carthaginians cast living children into furnaces to satiate their false god Baal. We sacrifice our children's mental health and adult futures to appease our false god Woki. I'm not going to try to read the Latin.
No, it's French. Plus échange. Uh,
There you go.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
I think I read something that I wanted to comment on. Um, so let's see.
which part?
Well, I think the point about it being purposeful is something that I just keep coming back to.
Oh yeah.
We have to leave behind the idea that this is this natural development of things. I mean,
Oh, it's just sin. This is what happens with sin, and we lose down here.
well, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we lose our, but the point is that this is politically driven, and politically driven things need to be politically responded to.
Yes.
And so that's what I think we need to learn what is happening right here, and I think it's important because when we interpret all the things that are developing, we can't, like, this father's complaining to the school board, and he gets referred to the FBI. I mean, we have to step back and think about that.
After his daughter is raped,
Hmm.
right? Like, and they deny it and they cover it up, and it's like this is absolutely atrocious, right? This is as bad as, like, you have all the libs freak out about um the Catholic Church and the sex scandal and all of those things, which, to one extent, like, to the extent that those things did happen, they're right to.
Hmm.
But they turn a blind eye to this stuff, right? And I don't say that to be like, oh, see, they're the hypocrites. We got them. It's that this is part of their religion,
Hmm.
right? This is part of their religion, and so it could do no wrong.
Hmm.
And so this man is a threat, right, to them. That's why he has to be destroyed, because he exposes them as false gods, right?
Hmm.
That's why you go to the FBI and take them down, right? This is part of what they believe in their very core is good and right, and they have to be stopped. Um, and it's so evil, right? That's the thing. It's so despicable and so evil that um and it isn't, like you say, it isn't just, well, people sin and this is what happens when people sin. This is political, and it's intentional, and it has to be fought at a political level.
Hmm.
It isn't just, well, we need to preach the gospel more, and then magically this stuff will be fixed, right? That's the typical evangelical line,
Hmm.
right? Is, well, what do we do about it? Well, we just need to preach the gospel. It's like, well, part of the gospel is Jesus is king, and he thinks these things are evil, and the people who believe in him should fight to stop them,
The other
right?
thing
That's
too
that's the implication of the gospel.
is we always forget that God uses means, right? God doesn't always
Yeah,
act directly, and politics is a means.
absolutely.
Like people say, why didn't Jesus just you know, lift up Noah and his family and save everybody, save them from the flood? Because he uses the means of an ark.
Yeah,
Noah had to work for years to build that way out. I mean, God
yeah,
uses these real life struggles and battles to protect his children, to get his way, and to drive things toward his ends. God doesn't always. I mean, God definitely works. The Holy Spirit definitely works in the heart, but this is also, he's also a God of history. He's also a God of society. And I think that we
mm,
need to remember that. I don't think American evangelicals have historically been very good on this issue, and there's a historical reason for that theologically, but we have to realize that politics is the means through which God accomplishes his will.
yeah. And if you don't get, and so much of it, like you say, is it's this individualistic theology is really what drives it, where it's like God only cares about individuals, only individuals, individuals, individuals. And if you think that way, like, that fits with a classically liberal system,
Hmm.
right? That you can operate that way for decades or centuries. But as soon as that classically liberal system collapses and is changed into something else, it doesn't work that way anymore.
Hmm.
right? You can't just have this hyper focus on the individual against the rest of society. And you see this in the Bible, right? God in, you know, First Samuel through Second Kings, right? He cares about the entire society as a whole as much as he does individuals within it.
Hmm.
Right? And it's like, well, and then you'll have people, well, that's ancient Israel. We're not Israel. And it's like, well, the church is, and and any nation that is filled with Christians um, is a nation he cares about, and so he cares about them as a whole as much as he does individuals. And you see that, you see condemnations of entire nations and judgments against entire nations in the Bible, and it's like, and so that's like when you look at some of the more absurd criticism of Christian nationalism, you see that it's like, well, God doesn't care about individual nation or entire nations. He only cares about individuals.
Yeah.
And it's like, where do you get that from? Right? And because it isn't just the judgments that God brings on nations isn't just Israel, right? There are other nations too, like Babylon. You read the book of Jeremiah, there's condemnation of Babylon and of Egypt. And it's like, why is he judging these nations? Well, as a nation, right? Why
Hmm.
does he judge Canaan as an entire nation and not just, well, what about the individuals that were committing, idolatry? Why does he want Joshua to go in and kill everybody, including the little kids?
Hmm.
Right? I mean, that's something people have to reckon with, and they don't, especially like within this evangelical individualist mindset. It's like they don't think about that at all, at all. So, well, God said to do it, and that's where we leave it. Right. But think about the implications of that, right?
Yeah.
God is judging the entire nation as a whole and saying, eradicate them,
Hmm.
right? It's like, well, he doesn't do that today. He doesn't think that way today. It's like, okay, but he did it one time. So what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Right? How are we supposed to think about it? It's like, well, God cares about corporate collective structure and he cares about individuals at the same time. And
Hmm.
that should affect our thinking on everything.
Hmm.
So anyway, continuing on, and he brings up the pre-woke Catholic Church here in the next in a parenthesis. You want me to read it?
I'm good.
Okay, go ahead.
We may note in passing that when similar atrocities occurred in the pre-woke Catholic Church, an institution the ruling class feared and despised, demands for accountability were deafening. Today, the only sounds one hears are from establishmentarians and their conservative incorporated enablers. This isn't happening. It's a culture war trope, ginned up by the MAGA racists, and anyway, it's no big deal, so lighten up. The most prevalent failures of education in history, it is widely accepted, have stemmed from a lack of it, failing to teach the poor basic skills such as reading and writing, or even deliberately depriving them of such learning. Now we have come full circle, but worse. We barely teach kids to read, write, or add anymore. Indeed, the most progressive corners of the education system denounce such emphasis on standards and core knowledge as white supremacist. There's
That's not an exaggeration. Like they literally do. They
yes,
literally call reading proficiency and math proficiency white supremacy.
right,
Right. And like you see these things, like people take
which is
surreptitious
yeah,
pictures at conferences, and it's like they really are saying this.
yeah, exactly. There's ample historical precedent for widespread illiteracy, but for teaching one's own citizens self hatred, degeneracy, and despondency without teaching them to read and write?
I know.
Barbarians at the gates. The typical tyrant enjoys wealth and power, which are easier to extract from a productive populace than from zombies. He therefore typically does not prioritize degrading his population beyond measures necessary to produce obedience. The serial humiliations inflicted on our people by its ruling class, not all of which, to say the least, generate profits, appear to be another element of contemporary life without historical precedent. Crime is a case in point. No society, whether free or despotic, benefits from crime, all else being equal. Though it's certainly true that a tyrant can find it useful to exempt his own partisans from criminal enforcement and even to encourage them to tyrannize his enemies. That's anarcho tyranny, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Criminals being criminals, this is a hard dynamic to keep from spinning out of control. In 2020, for instance, the ruling class unleashed BLM hordes and Antifa predators, plus assorted rioters and looters to despoil and burn some 220 American cities. Sacking was not uncommon in the ancient world. Rome was sacked many times, but always by foreigners, never at the instigation of her leading citizens. The Senate never riled up the plebes to scorch the Capitoline. Yet in the summer of 2020, our ruling class actively encouraged, through state-aligned media, the repeated sacking of Manhattan, the very beating heart of the Davos archipelago, where our richest and most powerful overlords live and work. They fired up mobs to trash huge swaths of Washington, D.C., their cherished imperial capital, which to this day has yet to recover. Why did they do that? Was there some nefarious plan to derive benefit that I don't understand? Or was this an instance of losing control of the shock troops? Either way, the events were unprecedented. Then there are the related issues of technology and our fake economy. These subjects are far too large to explore here and so must be treated cursorily. Let us merely say that modern digital technology is unlike any previous advance in human history. It threatens not only to become man's master and destroyer, other technologies have also threatened that, but also to remake his very soul or kill it.
Yeah.
The modern economy that technology enables is similarly anti-human. It deprives billions of the dignity of meaningful work at fair remuneration, while it enriches a tiny minority adept at manipulating bits and bytes to no discernible purpose or benefit. The world has had to endure oligarchs for millennia, but our empty plutocrats create nothing but new ways to waste time and innervate the spirit. They are, like the technologies that make them rich and powerful, an entirely new phenomenon. Finally, there is the endless insistence that every new dawn must begin a fresh year zero. We must start continually anew. What was acceptable yesterday is anathema today, and will be more so tomorrow. All that came before must be swept aside and destroyed with extreme prejudice on a rolling basis. The most ferocious revolutionaries of yesteryear didn't do this. The Jacobins changed the calendar and guillotined a lot of nobles, but otherwise allowed France to remain French. The Bolsheviks did not touch the Russian literary or concert canons. To the contrary, they celebrated both. Mao made an attempt to start over until the more sensible party bosses realized that the old man, and especially his wife, had lost their minds and were destroying China, sidelined him, and quietly put an end to the Cultural Revolution 4 years before formally declaring mission accomplished. The Ayatollah did not ban Nowruz or other cornerstones of Persian tradition beloved by the Iranian people, but which predated his puritanical vision of Islam. This is a good point. Like we always draw analogies to the Jacobins and to the Bolsheviks and stuff, but literally our own leadership are destroying our heritage. I mean, the Jacobins, for all their problems, they were seeking the benefit of France and the French people, right?
Yeah.
The American elite, or the international elite, if you want to call it that, they hate America. They hate everything it stands for. They hate its history. They hate its cultural cornerstones. So
Yeah, they want to destroy it completely and to make it cease to exist.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more paragraphs. Our overlords, by contrast, insist on changing everything and will not stop until everything familiar is gone. When this is pointed out, they smirk about the slippery slope fallacy and gleefully lie. That will never happen, they say, until they insist on it, and, once accomplished, move on to the next target. They are cultural locusts, devouring everything in their path. If the internal logic, if one may use that word in this context, of their passionate hatred is allowed to play out, no statue can be left standing, no traditional holiday observed, no name unchanged. If that outcome does not come to pass, it will not be because those driving toward it have a change of heart, nor is it likely to be because the right suddenly becomes effective in opposition. It will rather be because the locusts destroy too many of the country's remaining functioning parts too soon, causing the system to collapse before their program is complete, thereby making further progress impossible. Any one of the above elements would appear to be unprecedented, just a few in combination surely are, but all of them together? How, therefore, can anyone be confident that he knows what is going to happen, whether immediate collapse, drawn-out decline, or centuries of tyranny? Final part, the end.
The end.
If forced to bet, I would have to place my chips somewhere between imminent collapse and drawn-out decline. That's a large spectrum.
It is. Yeah.
I occasionally read theories of triple bank shots and four-dimensional chess. They really know what they're doing, only to marvel. Our regime cannot at present unload a cargo ship, stock a store shelf, run a clean election, handle parental complaints at a school board meeting, pass a budget bill, treat a cold variant, keep order in the streets, defeat a third world country, or even evacuate said country cleanly. And that's to say nothing at all of all the things it should be doing. that all non-joke countries do that it refuses to do. If our ruling class has a plan, it would seem to be to destroy the society and institutions from which they at present are the largest, one is tempted to say only beneficiaries. Do they think they can benefit more from the wreckage, or are they driven by hatreds that blind them to self-interest? Perhaps they're simply insane. Whatever the case, couple all this unprecedentedness with all this incompetence, and going long on woke America seems a sucker bet. But to end where we began, the very unprecedentedness of our situation means that all bets are off.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I mean,
think
that's the $1,000,000 question. I mean,
it,
do they have a game plan? Do they have an end game? Are they working towards something, or are they just in complete blind zeal about their destruction?
I think it's both. I mean, I think they want to remake society into this idealized vision of this globalist community, right? Where America's fully this economic zone. Um, but it is the difficulty is the shock troops that they have and the insanity that they unleash um is is eating through the seed corn,
Hmm.
right? They're not going to be able to sustain this world for, I mean, it's you see this when people talk about like catabolic collapse and the collapse of complex societies and complex systems that and you see it somewhat revealed during 2020 that, right, if you have just a minor disruption, and that largely was, I mean, it was a major disruption to our society, to be sure, but like economically in terms of the system, it wasn't this major shock to the system, right? You didn't have tens of millions of people dying from the plague. You had very relatively, compared to past events like the bubonic plague, right, a very relatively small number of casualties. You had, of course, the lockdowns were incredibly disruptive, um, but it it wasn't more disruptive than say like a world war.
Hmm.
It wasn't more disruptive than any of the things the United States went through in the 20th century, or throughout its history, like the Civil War. And so you have this incredibly complex system that requires extremely fine-tuned things. And like you see this, like the entire industrial production of the country, or really the world, all the shipping that's required, and things like, if you have just one thing go wrong in the entire chain, that messes everything up, and it messes everything up in this like overarching framework that's connected to it. Like if one component that's used in 10,000 different things isn't there, then all of a sudden now you don't have cars, and you don't have computers, and you don't have, all the, if like the microchips aren't there, and Taiwan gets invaded, right? Like then boom, that's done and gone, and you just don't have it anymore. You don't have the capacity to bootstrap the industrial production domestically.
Hmm.
And so, because of the nature of the complex system, right, the more chaos you introduce to it intentionally, through like especially like diversity initiatives, where you intentionally hire people who are less competent, there's going to be a downstream effect from that.
Hmm.
And so I think like you're not going to be able to sustain this for centuries, I don't think. And then you couple that with like the birth rates, the fact that the population is not replacing itself. So even if you import 100 million third world people to replace the people that are not being born, um those are not the same people with the same ability level, and you're not going to be able to have this technological society that you once enjoyed. So like the wealth and the prosperity that they've enjoyed for the last 80 years is in steep decline already, and they're not going to be able to maintain it. And so just from like that standpoint alone, and then that's without saying the political instability that results from all of the disorder.
Hmm.
Right, like at a certain point, even at people that are so pacified and so propagandized like ours, I mean, that's something that he doesn't really get into, but that's also something unprecedented, is the level and sophistication of the propaganda that
Hmm.
that people are under. I mean, even just like I noticed this with like the Ukraine war, where you have like anyone over the age of 50, or most people over the age of 50, no matter what you tell them, no matter what details and facts you give them about the situation, about how Obama overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014, and that these countries to the or these provinces to the east that are largely ethnic Russian said we're not being part of a fake government. We're going to secede.
Hmm.
And then the Ukrainian army bombed their villages for 8 years, and Russia finally had enough with it once Ukraine says signals they're going to move into NATO.
Hmm.
Right? If you identify the geopolitical dynamics of the situation and show how the process of how it got to where it is, and that there is some semblance of a case for why Russia does it, it falls on deaf ears. They cannot hear it, right? They just think Russia bad, they're communists, and they're going to remake the Soviet Union. And like all of a sudden, all the propaganda they heard from from their birth onward is activated,
Hmm.
and they are incapable of listening to any type of rational argument. And so, like I think going forward, just even to 2024, I don't know if you saw the CJ, but like the British the British Navy has signaled that they're going to start operations in the Black Sea to protect shipping and potentially engage the Russians. And so like we're tiptoeing to NATO countries actively being involved in the war. And if I'm thinking, okay, 2016 they did the Russia hoax, 2020 they did all the things that they did, all the fortification and so forth, the COVID and BLM and everything else. What's going to be the thing for 2024 that they do,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
like Jake Paquette brought this up on Twitter. The He ran for Senate in Arkansas and was a former NFL player for the New England Patriots. He is a great guy, a good follow on Twitter. He um he says that he thinks there's going to be boots on the ground in Ukraine sometime in 2024. And I have a hard time disagreeing with that prognostication
Yeah.
because
It's
like
one of
once
we're in one of those situations where if we're not constantly expanding, then everything collapses.
Mhm,
So they have to do
exactly.
that to maintain. Yeah, it's
And what happens is you remember, like we were both in high school at the time, but you remember like 2003, like if you like looking back on it, the Iraq war makes absolutely no sense. Like if you look at it objectively with like 20 years of history behind you, makes zero sense at all.
Mhm.
Um, but every patriotic flag waving American, as soon as their soldiers, right, our boys, our troops are going off to war, right, you were enthusiastically 100% behind them, no matter
Mhm.
what. And so, as soon as you start putting American troops on the ground in Ukraine, everybody, even all the MAGA people who are, somewhat skeptical, like they know about Burisma and Biden and all the corruption and things out of Ukraine, and they don't like that hundreds of billions of dollars are going over there. As soon as you send American troops there, all of the same people that have skepticism about it, that goes
Mhm.
out the window.
Mhm.
I mean, the same thing that happened during World War II, right? So the entire America First Committee, all the people were like, "Keep us out of war, keep us out of war." No, we don't want it, right? All of a sudden, now we're at war, and their sons are going off to war, and they have no choice but to be enthusiastically in support of their country.
Yeah, I mean, once you're in, you got to win or you're dead. So.
Yeah, and so like I think that's the switch that they'll pull if they feel like they have to,
Mhm.
right? It isn't like, oh, we're gonna swap Biden out with Gavin Newsom or whatever. I mean that maybe is a thing they'll do, or Michelle Obama. Like maybe they'll do that. Um, but the bigger thing is like how do they secure power for themselves? And this is something tried and true that they've always done is, well, we have a tenuous grasp on power, we're going to go to war.
Mhm.
And it's right there sitting there for them to go do. And so they'll concoct some type of justification for it that
Mhm.
seems semi plausible, right? Oh, the Russians attacked thus and such, and we're going to go. And so I think that that is something very likely that's going to happen. And then it's like all bets are off there, right?
Mhm.
Because the war has been fairly limited from the Russian perspective. Like they haven't thrown their entire force at it,
Mhm.
which I mean, also doesn't make sense from like the boomer con perspective that they're trying to remake the Soviet Union, because if they were, they would be pushing all the way to Kiev. But
Hmm.
they're right now they are trying to just hold the territory that they initially intended on taking.
Yeah.
And so it does that it makes like it makes the case much more plausible. But if war happened, they would have to send everything,
Yeah.
right? They would have to deploy their entire country, right? Their entire military strength, in order to do it. And the thing is, like, the people are like, oh, well, if we get in a major war, we're not going to win because the military's woke and it's such a joke. Um, I don't think that. I
No,
think
I don't either. I think it's a calculation. It's a demoralization thing to do the whole woke army thing. But they have the technology. They don't need the people.
they have the technology and they have the people too. Like the combat units are made up of like the best young men in America, right? They still are, right? The ones that actually go into combat.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what I mean. Like the recruiting stuff, it's all demoralization, humiliation stuff. But they're not. See, yeah, like James White, people like to say this all the time that we'll lose in 30 seconds if this army goes to war. That's not the army going to war.
no, those are people that, like, work in administrative jobs,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
can you
So
can
they're
have
like the social media people.
Yeah, you can have, or even like mechanics and stuff, right? Not the people that are carrying rifles off to the
Hmm.
battlefield. Like those are the same people that have always been.
Yeah.
And what will happen is if there is a war, they've already signaled this too. Like the War College talked about, in the context of China, if there's an invasion of Taiwan, right, that they would lose 3,600 men a day,
Hmm.
and they couldn't sustain losses like that without a draft. And
Hmm.
so the likelihood, like if there are American troops on the ground in Ukraine, there's going to be a draft. Like there's no way around it. They're going to have to do that. And so then you're going to be pulling from, right. Every Friday I
We're
do
too
the
old now, right?
I know. Well, yeah, we're too old, and my kids are too young.
Yeah,
Thank the
I know.
Lord. Um, but every Friday, I go do a chain gang for high school football, and so I see all the 17, 18-year-old guys, the best that America has to offer, and I'm like, and I sometimes I think like these are the guys that when they draft, those are the ones they're going to take. Like one, those are
Yeah.
the ones only in like physical shape to be able to do it. So all the high school football players across the country, those are going to be the ones that get nabbed
Hmm.
and get sent off to Eastern Europe to go get chewed up.
Yeah,
And
for the gay disco.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I think if we're doing prognostications, right, and certainly I hope somebody goes back to this episode a year from now and it's like, oh, Isker was wrong. No one would be more happy than me to be wrong about this. Like this is one place where I'm like, yep, totally happy to be wrong. You got me. I didn't know what I was talking about. Um, but I fear that this is very likely the result is going to take. And if that happens, I mean, who knows? I don't think. I mean, people freak out about like nuclear war. I don't think that is um, a very high possibility, but it's not a zero possibility.
Hmm.
It's not nothing, especially if they engage in this in a war with Russia and begin to, like, because they're not going to just stop at the Donbass and say, all right, we recovered the sovereign territory of Ukraine and secured freedom. They're going to push all the way to Moscow,
Hmm.
right? They
Of
will,
course.
and like you threaten this country that way, what are they going to do?
I mean, China will get involved. I mean, the whole
Yeah,
thing will blow up. So,
I mean, it would be a world war. Like they would invade Taiwan for sure
mhm.
because America's engaged in Eastern Europe. So it's it's terrifying. And then and the thing is, like once you go into war measures, then like the kind of stuff right now, like there was just this report that the FBI is like investigating MAGA people for terrorism. Like they're the big terrorist threat is the MAGA people, which we've known that this is what they're doing.
Mhm.
Um and and so they can concoct any rationale to lock people up. If you're at war, anyone on the right who's dissenting and saying this war needs to stop, this is bad, dodge the draft, all that kind of stuff, they'll put you in jail for sedition,
Mhm.
right? There will be. I mean, maybe they won't call it that. They'll concoct some legal strategy to be able to, but they'll be actively doing domestic operations against anyone on the right. And so the police state will be ramped up to an 11. And when you're at war, there are all sorts of war measures. They could say, well, for our own safety, we're going to lock everyone down, and you all have to be at home. Like, they could do lockdowns again. They've already done it,
Hmm.
right? So every kind of tyranny that we've already seen in the last 3 years
I think
is on the.
conservatives. I think conservatives would more easily fall for those types of military lockdowns than they did COVID.
Yeah, they're not gonna get fooled again by COVID for sure.
Right.
So they're not going to do that one again, but they'll do whatever they can and whatever they want to do if the country's at war.
Yeah.
And so I think that seems like the most likely play. And then all bets are off, and who knows if it doesn't go well, right? So imagine it not going well and Russia holds its own, and like you could see a collapse
Hmm.
in that scenario, right? You could see people react to the kind of tyranny that they would bring about.
Do you think?
Uh,
Do you think we only have like 5 more minutes? But do you think the American regime recognizes its own fragility? That's the hard part. I
yeah,
mean,
I don't know. I think
because
so. I mean, they're going around in like they what did they execute two elderly men for Facebook posts last
hmm
month?
hmm
Right? They're going around doing that kind of stuff. Like I
But
think
do you
I think
think
they have to.
do you think they recognize that if confronting the East militarily, um, like any mistake in like the American capital economy is done? I don't. Do you think they recognize that?
I don't know.
That's the
I
scary
don't
part, and
know.
I guess that's part of what Anton's asking. Are they aware?
I think I don't know. I think there is. I mean, on one hand, like there is this incredible amount of hubris around these people. Like they think they own the world and they can do no wrong. But I at the same time, I don't think they understand their own weakness. Right? I think they think if they get through this, if they take down Russia, if they push back again, contain China, then they can maintain a hegemony over the world forever.
Yeah.
I think that's their line of thought, and um, that's a dangerous play. Like it is extremely
I
fragile.
don't.
It's
I
like I
don't
don't know if they
see.
afford it. I don't think that they can pay. How could they pay for a world war at this
Well,
point?
they can't. I mean that. Yeah, they can't pay for it. But I think that's a really stupid move because like the entire culture of Washington is has extremely high time preferences,
Oh
whereas
yeah,
China has extremely low time preferences. So
yeah.
I don't think we could defeat them on that front.
I don't think so either. I mean, I think it is. That's where I go back to like with Anton that and Charles Haywood that the regime could collapse inwardly on its
Hmm.
own. And I think it very well could. And so I think what's incumbent upon us is to remain, this vanguard and of rightism and of the I mean, some of the stuff we talk about with Lafayette Lee, retaining this love of our actual culture, our actual country, our actual heritage, and keeping it alive for our posterity. If we're able to do those things through the midst of all of it, then we'll come out okay, no matter what happens in the future.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the future looks grim for the regime. If I like with Anton, if I had to put money on it, right, and we kind of are like we're betting our lives on what's going to happen and what direction we take, what things that we do. Like, why do we do the podcast? Why do we write online? Why do we do all the stuff that we do? It's because I have a hope for our people, for our country, um, beyond our lifetimes,
Hmm.
and I think our people will survive and Lord willing prosper into the future. But right now it's grim. Right now it's not good. Right now it is this oppressive, evil regime that rules over us. That God willing, he'll remove. He'll get rid of them. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think on that question of the missteps that they could take and the hubris that they have?
I think they're completely blind to their own weaknesses.
Yeah.
I think they're so zealous. I think they're so prideful. I think sort of the course of history shows that when empires get to in the place where America is, they think they can get away with anything.
Yeah.
You know, like yeah, I think that they have a complete miscalculation of their own. That they think that they're arguing or pursuing policy or international policy from a position of strength. I think a good demonstration of this is the diplomats working in Hungary.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like
The point Tucker
there's
made.
yeah, there's absolutely no recognition that the world is turning against America. It's haughty, it's blind to its own disgusting nature, and I
Mhm.
think that that's sort of the course of history. And I don't think it could. I don't think it could. I think it's really weak. I think one misstep and everything falls apart for them,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, to
But
that
but
end,
that
we can hope. Yeah.
that only means imminent collapse, though, if they actually engage in something. You
Yeah.
know, so like if they make that misstep, they're done. They
But
can't win it. But
I think the pressure of the domestic political situation is on them, though,
mhm,
right? It's so that's that if something's going to force their hand to committing a misstep, that would be it. It's like, well, we have to do this, or somehow Trump could get in, right? That I think drives a lot of the things that they do,
mhm,
and so it they might have to push that button, right? I think that's like, I mean, and you see this with like right now. I mean, even with the vacating the chair of the speaker, right? We didn't even talk. We've gone an hour and 15 minutes. We haven't talked about that this week, and that's the big news.
yeah.
Like the first time that's has that ever happened? I think when they
Uh,
vacated the chair.
I
I mean,
think it's happened once in like the 19th century. Yeah.
yeah, like after the Civil War or something. Like this is a thing that doesn't happen, and and these all these people are freaking out. Like I don't know if you saw the video of Chip Roy just chimping out, just these people, and he's like cursing and everything, and it's like, what on earth? Like he's going nuts. Like he's gonna start flinging poo, and it's like, and he's supposed to be this like staunch conservative. It's like I'm fighting for our country, and the guys that died in Normandy and blah blah blah. And it's like this, this is a Speaker of the House who is a joke, who is terrible, and who went along with virtually everything Joe Biden wanted,
Yep.
and betrayed the promises that he made in order to get elected Speaker.
Yep.
And he's finally being held accountable. Someone in Washington, D.C. is being held accountable, and all of you are losing your minds. And the reason they're losing their minds is because, right, there could be a government shutdown, and Ukraine will stop, getting billions and billions of dollars and billions of aid.
Oh no.
That's why they're losing their minds over it,
Yeah.
because the entire regime has committed itself to this conflict, and it could be over if they don't pass a budget. And so
Yeah.
that's why they're going nuts over it, because there's no Speaker of the House, and there's no um the prospect of a shutdown is very likely, and like the Ukraine war could end before they get a chance to do all the stuff we just talked about, if they don't have any money. And
Hmm.
so like that, I think is really something. Like, it like stuff like this reveals what these people are,
Hmm.
right? It reveals their priorities and what they care about. And you see this, like I saw, Mark Levin is freaking out about it on Twitter, and is getting ratioed to oblivion about it. Like all of the people that listen to him are like, no, no, McCarthy had to go. Like Gates is the only one fighting for us.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? And and it's like, no, we need them. They voted with the Democrats. It's like, you don't have a problem voting with the Democrats to give billions to Ukraine. You know, you voted with every single Democrat. Well, you did. They did too, right? But one lousy speaker gets kicked out, and now it's the end of the world,
Hmm.
right? It's insane. It's nuts. But it reveals, just like you said, how haughty and hubristic these people are, and the domestic politics, I think, is forcing them to escalate
Yeah.
in different ways. It's forcing that, because the people are not putting up with it, and they're not putting up with it because, like, everybody sees how much stuff costs, how much gas costs, how much food costs, how much housing costs, and it's putting pressure on the people. Like, why is Trump leading Biden in the polls? Which, I don't know if that like ever like the lead that he's had in so many of these polls ever happened in 2020. I think it was always very close.
Hmm.
And like there was one poll that had him like 10 points ahead.
Yeah.
And it's like, and supposedly you're supposed to think that he has such a high unfavorability rating. And it's like, I don't
Yeah.
care if I don't like the guy. I want to be able to afford to live. That's how people think, because when you put it when the rubber meets the road, people want people want to be able to live and survive and have money. And it's like the pocketbook is always the thing that drives a lot of this stuff, and that's what's driving it. Is just the cold, brutal realities of our economic situation,
Yeah.
and people are fed up. And so I don't think like, so if you have that, and it's not like they can just get rid of the people, right? It's not like they can get rid of 80 million Americans. They want to, they could try.
Yeah.
But there's 80 million Americans that are sick of it. And that's putting pressure on domestic politics, that's forcing them to do crazier and crazier stuff internationally and domestically. So that I think is something, in this whole equation as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and that's things are coming to a head, and I think this late fall and winter could get interesting, but
Absolutely.
nothing ever happens. So
Until it does.
it does. All right,
Until it does. Yeah.
cool. Well, good conversation. We didn't even get to the Twitter thread. We should do a special episode on the Matt Gaetz thing and the Twitter thread.
Yeah, we should. Maybe we will after the weekend. Maybe we'll, or early next week. We'll
Maybe
do
we
a
will.
bonus episode for premium subscribers.
Yeah. All right, Andrew.
All right, that's great. Well, do you have anything that you want people to check out? No new articles yet?
No new articles.
Okay. Yeah.
Hopefully soon. Allegedly I have time, but things keep coming up. So
Yeah, we'll see.
nothing new. Follow me on Twitter. That's it.
All right. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter and Gab News as well. And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy the conversation, please share this with friends, with other people. Like and subscribe, of course, if you aren't already. The subscribing really helps. Leave reviews, leave comments. Comments also help drive traffic. So if you like what CJ has to say, or if you like any of the points we make, or if you think we're completely crazy, and or if you hate this Anton article, let us know, because the comments are always good. I try to engage with them, and it helps us know what all of you think. So anyway, have a wonderful week. Stay dangerous, and we will see you next time.